Imagine boarding
You
a
will
plane with a
do
first-class
as
ticket in your
I
hand,
say.
only to be told you don't belong.
How
What
dare you
happens when a
question my
calm,
authority?
dignified
I am
woman,
the captain
who
of this
also happens to be
aircraft.
one of the most powerful
Please.
black CEOs in America, is pushed to the edge of humiliation at 30,000 feet? What would you do if the very system designed to serve you turned against you? Would you stay silent, or would you rise, steady and unshaken, and force an entire airline to face its own reflection? Tonight, we follow the extraordinary journey of Dr. Naomi Ellington, a woman who transformed an act of discrimination into a movement that the world would never forget. On this flight, a simple seat became a symbol, a cabin became a courtroom, and a voice of calm strength ignited a fire for change. But here's the question that will linger in your mind. How much power does one person truly have when dignity itself is under attack? Stay with us as this story unfolds raw, real, and unforgettable. And before we dive in, don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel.
You will do
Because what you're
as
about to
I
hear
say.
is more than a story. It's a turning point. The announcement echoed across the terminal, a metallic voice softened by years of frequent flyer fatigue. Flight 728 to San Francisco is now boarding all first-class passengers. The gate area hummed with quiet urgency, business travelers on calls,
How
families
dare you
juggling
question my
bags,
authority? I am
and
the
that
captain
distinctive
of this
smell
aircraft.
of recycled coffee
Please.
drifting from the nearby kiosk. Dr. Naomi Ellington closed her laptop with calm precision and slipped it into her leather briefcase. She wore a navy suit that struck the balance between elegance and restraint. Her presence wasn't loud, it was steady, almost magnetic. She stood, adjusted the strap of her bag, and walked toward the gate. Her steps were deliberate, unhurried. She had taken thousands of flights before, but this one carried the same weight she always felt when moving through spaces where her presence was often questioned before it was respected. As she approached the gate scanner, the attendant smiled mechanically, scanned her ticket, and said, "Welcome aboard." For a moment, Naomi exhaled, grateful the process was smooth. But calm rarely lasted long in spaces where her identity preceded her credentials. The jet bridge was cool, a faint hiss of ventilation overhead. Naomi entered the cabin, the plush curve of first-class seats opening before her. Seat 2A was hers, by both ticket and intention. She placed her briefcase carefully in the overhead bin and settled into her seat. From across the aisle, a flight attendant with sharp eyes and a clipped smile paused. Her name tag read Kendra Lowell. She glanced at Naomi, then at the seating chart in her hand. There was a subtle narrowing of her gaze, the kind that said a judgment had already been made. "Excuse me," Kendra said, her tone smooth but edged. "Are you certain this is your seat?" Naomi looked up. Her voice remained even. "Yes." "Seat 2A." Kendra tilted her head. "First class has strict boarding qualifications. Do you have your boarding pass handy?" Naomi handed it over without hesitation. Kendra glanced at it, her eyes lingering longer than necessary, then handed it back. Instead of moving on, she leaned in slightly, lowering her voice but keeping the condescension intact. "These seats are reserved for premium travelers. Sometimes passengers make mistakes." Naomi felt the familiar tightening in her chest. Not anger, yet just that deep recognition of being questioned in spaces where others were welcomed without pause. She adjusted her posture, shoulders straight, voice calm. There's no mistake. Nearby, another passenger, an elderly woman in a tweed coat, observed the exchange. Her silver hair caught the cabin light. She frowned, but said nothing, at least not yet. Kendra's lips pressed thin. She walked briskly toward the galley, muttering something to another attendant. Naomi kept her gaze steady out the window, watching the late afternoon sun paint the tarmac in streaks of orange. Her phone buzzed. A message from her chief of staff. Celine Ward Board meeting still on for tomorrow. Safe travels. Dr. Ellington. Naomi typed a brief acknowledgement, though the knot in her stomach told her the evening might hold its own board meeting of sorts, right here at 35,000 feet. She had been through this before: misunderstandings, assumptions, indignities, yet each time carried its own sting. She breathed slowly, steadying herself. Passengers continued boarding. A young woman with a braided bun and an open laptop slid into seat 3C. She adjusted her phone on a small stand, live streaming casually to what looked like a modest following. Naomi overheard her voice. "Okay, boarding first class now. Let's see how this goes," before she turned her attention back to the glowing screen. This was Jada Morales, though Naomi did not know her name yet. From the cockpit, Captain Douglas Mercer leaned into the cabin briefly, greeting passengers with professional cheer. His presence was a reminder of authority, though for Naomi, authority had always been a double-edged sword. It could protect, or it could dismiss. Kendra returned, now accompanied by a man in a supervisor's badge, Victor Harlan. He had the air of someone who enjoyed playing referee, his steps brisk, his chin lifted slightly too high. "Ma'am," Victor said, stopping by Naomi's seat, "we've received a concern about your boarding. Could I see your identification?" "Please." Naomi tilted her head. "You've seen my boarding pass. What additional identification do you require?" Victor smiled, the kind that wasn't meant to comfort, just a precaution. "First class requires verification of ticket purchase. We need to ensure, well, sometimes there are errors." Naomi's mind churned, though her face remained composed. She thought of the countless hours she had spent fighting to open doors for others, only to be asked to prove again that she belonged in one herself. Should she push back here? Should she acquiesce to keep the peace? Her inner dialogue sharpened. If I comply, I reinforce their assumption that I owe them proof. If I resist, I risk escalation before takeoff. She thought of the headlines she had read just months earlier, of other passengers humiliated, escorted off planes for no reason but assumption. "Mr. Harlan," she said quietly, "my boarding pass is valid. My seat assignment is correct. That should be sufficient." Victor's smile faltered slightly, but Kendra hovered behind him, arms crossed, eyes gleaming with silent vindication. The elderly woman across the aisle leaned forward now. Her voice was crisp, edged with years of practiced authority. "Young man, perhaps you should double-check before embarrassing yourself." Victor glanced at her, annoyance flickering in his eyes. "Ma'am, please allow us to handle this." But the tension was no longer private. A murmur rippled through the cabin. Jada Morales angled her phone discreetly, whispering to her viewers, "Something's happening in first class. Stay tuned." Her audience count ticked upward in glowing numbers. Naomi adjusted the cuff of her sleeve, her movements slow, deliberate. "I suggest you review your passenger manifest," she told Victor. Her tone was calm, but beneath it lay steel. He hesitated, caught between protocol and pride. Kendra whispered something sharply in his ear. The hum of boarding continued around them, but here in row 2, time had begun to fracture into something heavier, denser. Naomi's phone buzzed again. Another message, this one from her general counsel. "Anthony Graves regulators pushing tomorrow's agenda. Call if urgent." She stared at the screen, then at Victor and Kendra standing before her. Not urgent yet, she thought, but it's building. Outside, the sky deepened into twilight. Inside, The stage was being set. Naomi Ellington had learned long ago that the first confrontation was rarely the last. What mattered was how you carried yourself through it, and what truths were revealed when pressure refused to ease. She folded her hands in her lap, looked Victor directly in the eye, and said, "Proceed carefully. You're about to make a choice you cannot undo." The final boarding call echoed down the aisle, and the doors closed with a muted thud. Passengers settled into their seats. The overhead bins clicked shut, and the low thrum of the engines grew louder as ground power transitioned to the aircraft systems. In seat 2A, Dr. Naomi Ellington adjusted the seatbelt across her lap and drew a deep breath. She knew instinctively the situation wasn't finished. Victor Harlan returned with a tablet in hand. He leaned slightly into Naomi's space, his voice pitched just loud enough for the surrounding passengers to hear. "I've reviewed the manifest," he said, "but there seems to be a discrepancy. Could you provide a secondary form of identification?" Naomi's pulse quickened, though her face betrayed nothing. This wasn't about protocols anymore. It was about performance, about the need for him to prove authority in front of his staff. She studied his eyes and saw a flicker of doubt beneath the practiced smile. "Mr. Harlan?" Naomi replied evenly. "My boarding pass matches my seat. If there is a discrepancy, it lies in your system, not with me." Kendra Lowell hovered just behind him, arms folded tightly across her chest, her posture radiating satisfaction. The role of enforcer seemed to suit her. From across the aisle, the elderly woman spoke again. "For heaven's sake, the woman is sitting where her ticket says. Why are you dragging this out?" Victor's jaw tightened. "Ma'am, please remain seated. This does not concern you." But it did concern her, and everyone else. The cabin had gone still, eyes drifting toward row 2. Conversations hushed. Jada Morales discreetly angled her phone again, whispering to her viewers, "Okay, folks, this is escalating. She's calm, super calm, but they're pushing hard. This is not right." The viewer count ticked upward. 400, 600, 800 numbers climbing faster than the plane's eventual altitude. Naomi's thoughts churned in quiet rebellion. She considered compliance, pulling out her wallet and flashing the gleam of platinum that so often silenced doubters. But a deeper voice within pushed back. Why should I always be the one to prove? Why should my legitimacy require spectacle, while others are trusted without question? Her father's words, spoken decades ago, whispered in memory. Sometimes you fight by speaking softly. Sometimes you fight by refusing to move at all. She placed her hands gently on her knees. Posture upright. Gaze steady. "You've made your request," she said. "I've already provided my boarding pass. That is sufficient. If you believe otherwise, please state which federal regulation authorizes you to demand further proof from seated passengers who have cleared security and boarding." Victor blinked, momentarily caught off guard. His rehearsed authority collided with her precision. He hesitated, thumb hovering over the tablet screen, as if searching for an answer that didn't exist.
"As I say."
The hum of the engines filled the silence. Jada's viewers lit up the chat. "She's calling him out. This is discrimination. Someone tag the news. Record everything." Kendra leaned in, whispering harshly, "Don't make this harder than it has to be. People like you always try to." She cut herself short.
"How dare
But the
you
words
question
lingered
my
in the
authority?
air like smoke.
I am the captain of this aircraft."
Naomi's eyes narrowed ever so slightly. "People like me," she repeated softly. The stillness of her tone made the words cut sharper than any raised voice could. The cabin seemed to hold its breath. Victor cleared his throat, attempting to steer the moment back under control. "Look, ma'am, I'm simply following procedure. We can't allow disruptions. You are the disruption, Naomi replied. Her voice was calm, deliberate, resonant enough to reach the surrounding rows. I am seated, quiet, and compliant. You have chosen to escalate without cause. The elderly woman across the aisle nodded firmly. She's right. A businessman 2 rows back muttered audibly. Ridiculous. Victor's jaw flexed. Authority was slipping through his fingers, but pride tethered him to the performance. He tapped his radio clipped to his belt. Captain Mercer, could you step into the cabin for a moment? Moments later, Captain Douglas Mercer appeared from the cockpit, his tall frame and calm authority filling the aisle. He glanced at Victor, then at Naomi, then at the watchful passengers. What's the situation? The captain asked. Victor launched into explanation, words tumbling with just enough emphasis to frame Naomi as the complication. Passenger here in 2A refuses to provide identification beyond her boarding pass. Potential mismatch with our manifest. Captain Mercer turned to Naomi. Ma'am, may I see your boarding pass? She handed it over without hesitation. He studied it carefully, then consulted the manifest on Victor's tablet. He frowned. This shows her assigned to 2A. I don't see the problem. Victor shifted. There could be an error. I was just taking precautions. Mercer's eyes narrowed slightly, reading more than Victor's words. He handed the boarding pass back to Naomi. Dr. Ellington, welcome aboard. Please remain comfortable. He used her full name, reading it from the pass, and in doing so, acknowledged her personhood. For a brief moment, Naomi allowed herself to breathe, but the reprieve was short-lived. Kendra leaned toward Victor, whispering urgently. He stiffened, then spoke louder than necessary. Captain, with all due respect, if there's even the appearance of impropriety, we risk regulatory exposure. I suggest removal until identity is verified. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the cabin. The elderly woman shook her head in disbelief. This is outrageous, she muttered. Naomi sat perfectly still, though inside her chest a storm raged. Removed. For sitting in the seat I purchased? Her heart pounded, but she refused to let it reach her face. Instead, she folded her hands, her voice soft but resonant. Captain Mercer, I ask you directly, is there any evidence, any protocol, any law that requires more from me than what I have already provided? Mercer hesitated. Regulations danced in his mind, but none applied here. He knew it. He also knew the politics of airline crews, the pressure to support supervisors, the unspoken code of siding with staff against passengers. Yet his gut told him this was different. Before he could answer, a sharp chime echoed. Naomi's phone vibrated. A message flashed from Celine Wardpress, already pinging us. Something brewing online. Need to know if you're okay. Naomi's eyes flicked toward Jada, who now had over 2,000 viewers on her live stream. The comments scrolled faster than the human eye could follow. Screenshots, recordings, hashtags sprouted like wildfire. The knot in Naomi's chest deepened, but so did her resolve. She thought of her employees, the thousands who looked to her leadership. She thought of her late mother, who had once been forced to leave a restaurant for no reason other than skin color. She thought of the young girls who might one day sit where she now sat, wondering if they belonged. I cannot yield, she told herself. Not this time. She lifted her chin, eyes locking on Victor. If you choose to remove me, you will not only violate my rights, you will invite consequences you cannot contain. Choose wisely. The engines roared louder, signaling imminent pushback. Yet inside row 2, time had slowed. Every second a crackling wire of tension. Captain Mercer weighed his choices. Victor waited, jaw tight, eager for validation. Kendra's arms were crossed in satisfaction. Jada's phone captured it all, her audience ballooning past 3,000. Passengers whispered, restless, caught between sympathy and discomfort. And Naomi sat still, her presence a quiet thunder, her silence louder than their accusations. The clash was no longer about one seat. It was about dignity, authority, and the fault lines of a society still struggling to decide who belonged where. The hum of the engines vibrated beneath the cabin floor as the jet prepared for pushback. Yet the air inside felt heavier than steel. Passengers fidgeted with seatbelts and phones, pretending to read magazines while stealing glances toward row 2. Everyone knew something was happening, but no one quite knew how it would end. Naomi Ellington sat tall, her back pressed firmly against the seat, her gaze steady on the captain. She could feel the weight of 100 eyes, but her composure remained unshaken. She had learned long ago that dignity was not silence, but restraint. Every pause, every careful breath was part of the armor she carried into spaces that tried to strip it away. Captain Douglas Mercer shifted slightly, sensing the storm forming in both the cabin and his conscience. He had faced engine failures, lightning strikes, and white-knuckle landings, but few situations tested him the way this did. The regulations were clear enough, a boarding pass was sufficient. Yet the culture of siding with crew pressed against him, whispering that protecting his team was the easier path. His mind wavered between what was lawful and what was comfortable. Victor Harlan, standing rigid by Naomi's seat, broke the silence. "Captain, with all due respect, this passenger refuses to comply. For the safety of all aboard, I recommend removal." His words dripped with authority, but it was authority built on sand. The elderly woman across the aisle, Agnes Whitmore, bristled. She leaned forward, her voice cutting through the tension. "This is absurd. She's done nothing wrong. I've flown for 50 years, and I've never seen such treatment. Shameful." Her silver hair glowed in the cabin lights, her presence steady and unwavering. A murmur rippled through the rows. A businessman in a tailored suit muttered, "She's right. This looks bad." A young mother holding her baby shook her head, whispering to her partner, "Why are they targeting her?" Meanwhile, Jada Morales' phone buzzed like a hive. Her live stream had swelled past 6,000 viewers, the chat exploding with outrage. Comments scrolled faster than she could read. "This is discrimination. Tag the news outlets. We're screen recording everything." The digital world outside the plane was already forming its judgment, even as the cabin struggled to find its own. Naomi turned her head slightly, her calm gaze sweeping the aisle. She saw the divided faces, the quiet witnesses, the silent supporters. She also saw the ones who avoided her eyes, who preferred to shrink into their seats and let the storm pass without choosing a side. She recognized them all. She had seen them in boardrooms, in universities, in neighborhoods. Silence had always been the easiest currency. Her mind flickered with doubt. Should I relent hand over the ID? Let the flight continue. Avoid the spectacle. The thought coiled in her chest, tempting her with the comfort of peace. But another voice rose within her, firm and resolute. If I yield now, I am not only yielding for myself, I am yielding for every person who will come after me, sitting in this same seat, facing this same humiliation. She folded her hands, lifted her chin, and chose to remain unmovable. Victor's radio crackled. "Security on standby at the gate," came a voice. His lips curled into a faint smile, as if reinforcements would finally deliver him the victory his pride demanded. Captain Mercer felt the knot in his stomach tighten. He knew that once security entered the cabin, the situation would spiral beyond his control. He imagined the headlines, the footage, the fallout. His eyes lingered on Naomi, poised and unshaken. A flicker of shame crossed his features. Shame that he had hesitated when the truth was clear. Agnes Whitmore raised her voice again, louder this time. "You should be ashamed of yourselves. She belongs here. Anyone can see it." She turned toward Naomi, her tone softening. "Don't you move, dear. Don't you let them push you out." Naomi met her eyes, and in that brief exchange, a silent bond formed across generations. Strength recognized strength, but Kendra Lowell was not swayed. She leaned against the galley wall, her arms crossed, eyes sharp. "Captain, if we don't act decisively, we risk losing control. This passenger is already disruptive." Disruptive, Naomi finally spoke, her voice calm but piercing. "I am sitting quietly in the seat I purchased. The only disruption here is the prejudice you refuse to confront." The cabin fell into silence again, broken only by the low whir of the air system. Jada's livestream chat surged, hashtags exploding into life. "She belongs here," "Equal Sky," "Flight 728. Victor's radio crackled once more. "Security ready. Do you want us to enter?" All eyes turned to Captain Mercer. His authority was absolute, yet fragile, balancing between courage and convenience. Sweat beaded faintly at his temple as he
You will
considered the
do
weight of his choice.
as I say.
If he sided with his staff, he risked inflaming an injustice that would define his career. If he sided with the passenger, he risked fracturing crew solidarity. His conscience battled his instinct for order. Naomi's voice broke his thoughts, steady and deliberate. "Captain, history will remember not the rules you
question my
followed,
authority?
but
I
the
am the
choices
captain
you
of this
made when rules
aircraft.
failed to protect
Please.
dignity. Which side of history do you wish to stand on?" Her words sank deep, reverberating through the cabin. Even those who had stayed silent felt the tremor of truth. Victor bristled, his pride demanding escalation. He reached for the radio again, but Mercer's hand shot out, pressing it down. "Stand by," the captain said firmly. His eyes locked on Naomi. "I will handle this." The moment hung suspended, fragile as glass. Naomi breathed slowly, aware that each second shaped not just her fate, but the story already unfolding across thousands of screens outside. She thought of the young viewers, strangers yet connected, watching her silence, her stillness, her refusal to bow. For them, she would not yield. The engines roared louder, signaling readiness for departure. Yet the plane did not move. Inside, the cabin had become an arena, passengers divided, crew divided, and at the center, one woman who chose to sit in the seat she had rightfully claimed. The clash was no longer just between Naomi and a crew. It was between justice and prejudice, between dignity and humiliation, between the fragile ease of silence and the costly courage of truth. And as Naomi sat tall, unbroken, the world beyond the fuselage began to take notice, ready to carry her stand far beyond the cabin walls. The jet door had not yet closed when the first two airport security officers appeared at the threshold. Their dark uniforms stood in sharp contrast to the soft beige walls of the first-class cabin. The atmosphere shifted immediately, like a storm front rolling in. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Even the children, sensing something larger than themselves, fell quiet in their parents' arms. The officers stepped forward with measured authority. One was tall and broad-shouldered, his nameplate reading Officer Ramirez. The other, lean with sharp features, was Officer Kane. Their presence brought the faint metallic clink of radios and the heavy weight of officialdom. The entire cabin seemed to shrink under the possibility of forced removal. Naomi Ellington sat perfectly still, her breathing controlled. She had prepared for many kinds of battles in her career: boardroom challenges, legal showdowns, media scrutiny. But there was something uniquely humiliating about the idea of being escorted off an aircraft for no reason other than the color of her skin. She felt the sting not for herself alone, but for the countless others who had endured similar moments without witnesses, without live streams, without justice. Victor Harlan wasted no time. He gestured toward Naomi with a sweeping hand, his tone loud enough for every passenger to hear. "Officers, this passenger refuses to comply with standard protocol. We require assistance in removing her from the aircraft." The words hung in the air, thick with implication. Naomi could feel eyes darting toward her, some filled with sympathy, others with curiosity, a few with quiet relief that it wasn't them. Her hands rested gently on her lap, but her heart pounded, each beat echoing the unfairness of the accusation. Officer Ramirez looked down at her, then back at Victor. Has she threatened anyone? Caused a disturbance? His tone was professional, but skeptical. Victor stiffened. She has refused to provide documentation and is disrupting the boarding process. That is disturbance enough. Naomi finally spoke, her voice calm yet firm. Officers, I have done nothing except sit in the seat that was assigned to me. My boarding pass clearly states two-way. I have remained respectful, quiet, and cooperative. The disruption here is not mine. Agnes Whitmore, the elderly woman across the aisle, leaned forward once more, her indignation uncontainable. That's the truth. She's been nothing but composed. These people are the ones raising their voices, not her. Jada Morales' livestream had surged past 12,000 viewers. Her camera captured every detail in Naomi's calm posture, Victor's clenched jaw, the uneasy faces of passengers. The comments poured in faster than ever. This is going viral. Someone tagged CNN. We're not letting them get away with this. Officer Kane glanced at the phone in Jada's hand, recognizing the power of the moment. He leaned closer to Ramirez, murmuring under his breath, "We're already live. Whatever happens next will be everywhere by morning." Ramirez nodded slightly, then turned to Captain Mercer. "Captain, what's your directive? Do you want us to remove this passenger?" Mercer hesitated, the conflict written across his face. The authority rested with him, yet the weight of it pressed like lead on his chest. His training urged him to maintain order, to support his crew. His conscience, however, whispered a different command. He looked again at Naomi, then at Agnes, then at the dozens of silent witnesses. His silence stretched long enough that even the engine seemed to wait. Naomi felt her throat tighten, doubt creeping in again. Will they drag me out? Will I become just another headline? Another video replayed without change? But then she steadied herself, drawing strength from something deeper. She thought of her father's words when she was young. Dignity is not what the world gives you. Naomi, dignity is what you refuse to let them take away. She lifted her chin slightly. "Captain," she said softly, but her words carried through the cabin. "The question isn't whether you can remove me. The question is whether you should—" The cabin erupted in whispers. Passengers shifted uncomfortably, torn between fear of confrontation and awe at her composure. Even Officer Ramirez seemed momentarily struck by the weight of her statement. Victor, desperate to maintain control, snapped at the officers. "She's stalling. Every minute we delay puts this flight behind schedule. Remove her now." Agnes Whitmore slammed her palm on the armrest. Enough. This woman is your customer. She paid for her seat, and you treat her like a criminal. Shame on you." Several other passengers nodded, emboldened by her courage. A young man in business attire spoke up, his voice shaky but clear. "She's right. This doesn't feel right. She deserves to stay." The tide was turning. Silent witnesses were finding their voices. Jada's stream viewers soared past 15,000, the chat exploding with comments like "Passengers are siding with her. They can't throw her off now. This is history in the making." Captain Mercer finally spoke, his voice measured but firm. "Officers, stand down. No one is being removed from this aircraft at this time." Victor spun toward him, disbelief flashing across his face. "Captain, you can't be serious. This undermines crew authority." "I said stand down," Mercer repeated, louder this time. His decision rang out like a verdict. For the first time, Naomi allowed herself a small exhale. Relief washed through her, but only briefly, for she knew the battle was far from over. Victor's pride would not yield so easily, nor would Kendra Lowell's icy glare from the galley. But the captain's choice had shifted the balance. The narrative had cracked open, and a light was beginning to shine through. Inside her chest, conflicting emotions raged. Gratitude for Agnes, for Jada, for the passengers who spoke up. Anger that she needed their validation to justify her place. Fear of what still might unfold. Yet above all, determination. She would not leave this plane. Humiliated? Not today. Officer Ramirez nodded slowly, signaling to Kane. "We'll remain nearby if needed, but we're not escalating this." They stepped back, their presence still looming, but no longer a threat. Passengers exhaled collectively, as if the entire cabin had been holding its breath. Victor's jaw tightened, his face flushed red. He opened his mouth to protest again, but Mercer cut him off. "That's enough. Supervisor, return to your station." The authority in Mercer's voice was final, leaving no room for argument. Victor glared at Naomi, his eyes seething with unspoken rage. But for the first time since the confrontation began, he turned away, defeated. Naomi sat in silence, her hands still folded, her composure unbroken. Yet inside, her thoughts whirled. What happens next? Will this be the end, or only the beginning? She glanced briefly at Jada's phone, the scrolling comments moving too fast to read. Out there, beyond the cabin, her story had already taken flight. The world was watching, and with every passing minute, the pressure on this airline grew heavier. The engines revved again, a reminder that the aircraft had not yet left the ground. Passengers looked around nervously, wondering if the flight would depart at all. But Naomi knew the journey had already begun, not just for her, but for everyone who had witnessed the truth. Because once the world saw, it could not unsee. And once the truth took flight, it could not be grounded. The aircraft hummed with nervous energy. Though the engines had spooled to life, the plane remained at the gate. Passengers shifted uneasily, wondering if they would depart at all. The captain's decision to stand down had kept Naomi Ellington in her seat, but it had also left the airline in limbo. The tension was no longer just about one passenger. It was about the entire authority structure of the flight. Naomi sat tall in her seat, her hands resting lightly on her knees. Outwardly, she appeared serene, but her thoughts churned. She replayed every moment since boarding, the look of dismissal in Kendra Lowell's eyes, the disdain in Victor Harlan's voice, the humiliation of being told she did not belong in the very seat her money and loyalty had secured.
I say.
And yet, under all of it, there was resolve. Her father's words echoed once again. Dignity is not granted. It is claimed. Agnes Whitmore reached across the aisle, her hand trembling slightly from age, yet steady in purpose. She touched Naomi's sleeve. "My dear, whatever happens
How
next,
dare you question my
you've
authority?
carried yourself
I am
with
the
more
captain
grace
of this
than anyone
aircraft.
else in this cabin.
Please.
Don't let them shake that from you." Naomi turned to her, her eyes softening. "Thank you, Agnes. Sometimes the hardest part is staying still when everything inside you wants to fight." Jada Morales caught the exchange on her live stream, her viewers climbing past 22,000. The chat scrolled with comments. "She's incredible. That older woman is a queen. This is history in real time." Others speculated about Naomi's identity. Who was she? Why did she carry herself with such authority? Someone had dug up a business conference photo and claimed it was Naomi Ellington, CEO of Ellington Strategic Capital. Screenshots flew across social platforms. The narrative was already escaping the cabin walls. Meanwhile, in the galley, Victor Harlan hissed under his breath to Kendra Lowell, "We can't let this stand. If she stays, we lose all credibility with the passengers." Kendra's lips tightened. "Captain Mercer is weak. He should have backed us. Now we look like fools." Victor's jaw clenched. "Not if we frame it correctly. We'll say she threatened the crew. We'll call operations and have ground control intervene. This isn't over." Naomi overheard fragments of their whispers. She closed her eyes briefly, steadying herself. A familiar temptation tugged at her. "Reveal who you are. End this instantly." She had the power. Her name carried weight in financial and corporate circles. But revealing it now would feel like surrendering to ego, like saying she mattered only because of her title. She wanted to matter simply as a human being who had paid for her seat. That internal battle pressed heavily on her chest. Captain Mercer returned from the cockpit, his face drawn. He stood before Naomi. "Ma'am, I need to ask, do you intend to continue to your destination without further incident?" Naomi looked him in the eye. "Captain, I never intended incident at all. I boarded with a valid ticket, sat in my assigned seat, and waited. That's all I've done." He nodded slowly, visibly relieved. Yet the strain did not leave his shoulders. He knew the situation was escalating beyond his control. His phone buzzed with a secure message from airline headquarters. He read quickly, his brow furrowing. The corporate office was already aware. News was spreading fast, and senior executives were demanding updates. At headquarters in Houston, a crisis team was assembling. Monitors displayed Jada's livestream, Twitter feeds, and security camera footage. The airline's communications director barked orders while legal counsel scrolled through federal discrimination statutes. They all recognized the risk. If the woman on that plane truly was Naomi Ellington, the implications were catastrophic. Back on board, Jada's stream continued. She zoomed in on Naomi, capturing her calm posture. "Folks, this is what strength looks like." She narrated, "She hasn't raised her voice once, and yet look at how they've treated her." The comments surged again. "She's CEO material. Someone find out who she is for real. We need to protect her." Victor's frustration boiled over. He stormed down the aisle toward Naomi. "You think you've won because the captain spared you. Think again. I'll have operations intervene. You'll be escorted out before we ever leave the ground." Gas rippled through the cabin. Agnes clutched her pearls. Jada swung her camera to capture Victor's sneering expression. Naomi inhaled deeply, steadying her heartbeat. She looked at Victor evenly. "Mr. Harlan, every word you speak is being broadcast to thousands. Choose carefully. For the first time, Victor faltered. His eyes darted to Jada's phone, realizing the trap he had walked into. But pride wouldn't let him retreat gracefully. He muttered curses under his breath and retreated to the galley, seething. Captain Mercer raised his voice for the entire cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. We are experiencing a delay due to an internal matter. Please remain seated. We will update you shortly." Passengers murmured uneasily. A businessman in row 3 leaned toward his seatmate. "This is insane. They're risking the whole flight schedule over one woman, and she hasn't even done anything." His seatmate nodded. "Yeah, but did you see the way she carries herself? There's something about her. She's not just anybody." Naomi overheard. A flicker of sadness touched her. Was her worth always to be measured by titles, by appearances? Couldn't she just exist, equal to every other passenger? The tension in her chest deepened, but she held steady. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, 3 missed calls from her chief of staff. She typed a quick message beneath the tray table, shielding it from view. "On board. Situation unfolding. Prepare legal team. Code 7 protocol. At headquarters." Her staff received the message. Phones lit up across the executive suite. Lawyers, compliance officers, and crisis managers sprang into action. Within minutes, Naomi's allies were on a secure call with airline executives. The power balance was shifting, though no one on the plane yet knew how drastically. Meanwhile, Jada's stream crossed 30,000 viewers. National journalists had joined the chat, quietly watching. Newsrooms were drafting headlines. The airline's PR department scrambled to prepare statements. Naomi sat perfectly still, her briefcase tucked beside her seat. She thought of opening it, pulling out the documents inside proof of her authority, her role, her identity. But she stopped herself again. Not yet. If she revealed too soon, the lesson would be lost. They needed to see her as simply another woman deserving of dignity. Only when the injustice was fully undeniable would she let the truth out. Agnes leaned closer, whispering, "My dear, why not tell them who you are? End this madness." Naomi gave a small, sad smile. "Because, Agnes, if I end it with my title, then the message is that only someone like me deserves respect. But I want respect to belong to everyone." Agnes's eyes welled with tears. "You are remarkable." The cabin intercom crackled. Captain Mercer's voice again. "Ladies and gentlemen, I've received instructions from operations. We are to hold at the gate until further notice. Please remain calm." Passengers groaned. The delay was now unavoidable. Some checked their watches. Others muttered complaints. But more than a few glanced toward Naomi with sympathy. The longer the situation stretched, the more obvious the injustice became. Victor, still fuming in the galley, whispered harshly to Kendra, "If this goes viral, our careers are finished." Kendra crossed her arms. "Then we fight. We stick to the narrative." She was combative. She refused to cooperate. Neither realized that every word they spoke was being picked up faintly on nearby passengers' phones. Clips would soon surface online. Naomi gazed out the window at the tarmac, bathed in golden afternoon light. For a moment, she let herself drift inward. Why does it always have to be like this? Why must we fight so hard for simple dignity? She thought of her mother, who had worked 2 jobs so Naomi could study. She thought of her father, who had faced his own humiliations with quiet strength. She felt them with her now, their lessons echoing. She straightened once more. Whatever came next, she would not waver. She was not just fighting for herself. She was fighting for every passenger who had ever been told they did not belong. At that same moment, in the airline's headquarters, an emergency meeting began. Screens displayed Naomi's face from multiple angles. Jada's livestream, internal security cameras, even social media reposts. The CEO of the airline, Margaret Caldwell, entered the room, her expression grave. "If that really is Naomi Ellington," she said slowly, "then this isn't just a customer incident. This is a crisis that could destroy us. Back on board." Naomi adjusted her posture. The world outside had begun to stir, but inside the cabin, the battle was not yet finished. She knew the storm was only beginning, and somewhere deep inside, beneath the fear, beneath the anger, a fire of purpose burned brighter than ever. The cabin lights dimmed slightly as the plane remained frozen at the gate, its engines idling like a caged animal. Passengers shifted in their seats, restless and confused, whispering about the delay. The tension was no longer background noise. It had become the air everyone breathed. Naomi Ellington sat motionless in 2A, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Her phone vibrated again against her thigh. This time she knew she could not ignore it. She slid the device discreetly into her palm and read the message flashing across the screen. It was from Celine Ward, her chief of staff, Naomi. "We're on with legal. Anthony Graves says you must call in now. Board and HQ already escalating." Her stomach tightened. She had hoped to keep her identity hidden until the right moment, but the storm had already spilled beyond the cabin. If headquarters was already in crisis mode, the decision to reveal herself might be forced sooner than she wanted. She closed her eyes briefly, wrestling with herself. If I stay silent, they'll keep pushing. If I reveal who I am now, they'll claim I used power to silence criticism. Which is worse? Which carries the lesson? Agnes Whitmore leaned closer. "Dear, you look pale. What is it?" Naomi gave her a faint smile. "Just a message from my team. Things are moving quickly outside this plane." Jada Morales, still holding her phone discreetly, whispered for her viewers. "She's checking her phone. Something's happening. I think this is bigger than we even know." Her chat had exploded past 50,000 viewers, some now identifying Naomi by name, sharing articles about her business empire, her speeches on equity, her role as one of the most powerful black women in global finance.
How dare you question my authority? I am the captain
Victor
of
Harlan
this
noticed
aircraft.
the way passengers glanced at their phones, whispers spreading, eyes flicking toward Naomi with new recognition. His chest burned with unease. He stalked back down the aisle toward her seat. "Who exactly are you?" he demanded. His voice cracked louder than he intended, carrying through the cabin. Naomi lifted her gaze slowly. "I am a passenger, seated in the place I purchased, waiting for this flight to depart." Victor's lips curled. "That's not an answer." Naomi felt the pull inside her, the battle between revelation and restraint. For a moment she allowed silence to linger, her eyes fixed firmly on him. The silence itself was power, though it only stoked his anger further. Captain Mercer appeared again, summoned by the growing volume. He looked between Victor and Naomi, his patience thinning. "Supervisor Harlan, step back. You are not resolving this." Victor bristled. "She's hiding something. Look at the way the passengers are reacting. She's playing us." Naomi exhaled slowly. "The only thing I'm hiding, Mr. Harlan, is my exhaustion at being treated as if I don't belong." Gas rippled through the cabin. Passengers shifted, nodding faintly. Someone clapped once, then stopped, embarrassed. The weight of her words, quiet but searing, filled the space more effectively than shouting ever could. Her phone buzzed again. This time she answered. She slid the device to her ear, her voice low. "This is Naomi, on the other end." Anthony Graves' voice was urgent. "Naomi, you need to make your presence known. Headquarters has confirmed your identity. They're terrified. The CEO herself is on this call. They know they're exposed. If you speak now, you can turn this in your favor." She hesitated, her gaze drifting to Agnes, to Jada, to the silent passengers who watched every flicker of her expression. "Anthony, if I reveal myself too soon, I let them believe only people with power deserve respect. I want this to mean more than that." Anthony sighed heavily. "I understand. But the board is preparing action. If you wait too long, the narrative might slip from your control." Naomi's chest tightened. Control was already slipping, flowing out through Jada's livestream, through every phone in the cabin, through every newsroom preparing stories. She closed her eyes, feeling the weight of leadership pressing down. She had always known her role was bigger than herself, but in this moment, the responsibility felt heavier than the aircraft itself. "Patch me through to HQ," she said finally. Anthony clicked her into the secure call. Voices flooded the line. Celine Ward, calm but urgent. Caleb Monroe, compliance director, his voice sharp with strategy. And finally, the unmistakable cadence of Harold Kensington, the board chair. "Naomi," Kensington said, his tone heavy with both respect and dread. "We've seen the footage. The airline is spiraling. This is a crisis that could topple partnerships, markets, trust. What do you want us to do?" Naomi felt the eyes of the cabin upon her even as she spoke into the phone. "What I want," she said, her voice steady, "is for this to be more than a story about me. I want systemic change. I want protocols that prevent this from happening again to anyone." Agnes reached out, touching Naomi's hand softly, as if lending strength. Jada's viewers were now past 70,000, capturing Naomi's poise as she spoke. Though they could not hear the words of the call, Victor stood frozen nearby, realizing at last that this passenger was no ordinary traveler. Panic flitted across his face as the whispers of Naomi's identity solidified among the passengers. Kendra Lowell, arms folded tightly, muttered from the galley, "What's so special about her anyway?" But her voice trembled, betraying cracks in her certainty. "On the call," Celine's voice broke through, "Naomi, you don't have to carry all of this now. Say the word, and we'll mobilize legal and PR. We'll turn this incident into policy change." Naomi nodded slowly, her voice calm. "Prepare everything, but I will finish this my way." She ended the call and placed the phone gently on the tray table. Silence hung for a beat too long, as if the entire cabin was waiting for her next move. She looked around, her gaze sweeping across passengers and crew alike. Her voice was soft, but every ear bent toward it. "You have asked who I am. I will tell you. I am Dr. Naomi Ellington. I am the CEO of Ellington Strategic Capital, and I sit on the boards of institutions that shape the very policies you invoke. But more than that, I am a woman who bought a seat, like any of you, and I expect to be treated with the same dignity." The words rippled through the cabin like a shockwave. Gasps, murmurs, whispers. Jada's phone trembled in her hand as her viewership spiked past 90,000. Agnes clasped Naomi's hand tightly, tears glistening in her eyes. "You've done it, dear," she whispered. Victor's face drained of color. He stumbled back a step, his authority crumbling like sand in a storm. Kendra's jaw dropped, though she quickly looked away, unwilling to meet Naomi's eyes. Captain Mercer's posture shifted subtly, relief mingling with awe. He understood now the magnitude of what had just unfolded. This was no longer simply a passenger dispute. This was history unfolding in his cabin. Naomi breathed steadily, feeling the weight lift slightly from her chest. The fear of revealing herself had given way to clarity. She had not chosen this fight, but she had chosen to remain. And now, with the truth laid bare, the next chapter could begin. Outside the fuselage, the world erupted. News alerts pinged across phones. Headlines formed: CEO Naomi Ellington confronts airline discrimination. Mid-flight, hashtags trended worldwide. Stock tickers for the airline began to wobble. Inside the cabin, Naomi sat in 2A, composed yet burning with quiet fire. The battle had shifted. Now the real confrontation with accountability, with justice, was about to take flight. The moment Naomi Ellington revealed her name, the cabin changed. A ripple of recognition spread like a wave. Murmurs rising, phones buzzing. Passengers leaned toward one another, whispering what they had heard, searching her name online, confirming the truth for themselves. Within minutes, the space that had once been heavy with suspicion was now alive with shock, awe, and a growing sense of collective witness. Agnes Whitmore pressed her hand to her chest, her voice trembling. "I knew you were someone remarkable, dear, but I didn't realize the world already knew it, too." Naomi smiled gently. "Agnes, it shouldn't take my title to make me deserving of respect." Jada Morales' phone shook in her hands as she tried to keep her camera steady. "You guys, it's confirmed. She's Dr. Naomi Ellington, CEO, philanthropist. This is unreal." Her livestream soared past 120,000 viewers, comments flooding in faster than she could process. "She's a legend. This is systemic racism in real time. Protect Naomi. I'm never flying this airline again." Victor Harlan froze mid-aisle, his authority collapsing in on itself. His lips moved as if to form words, but none came. He knew the name. Everyone in the industry knew the name. Naomi Ellington's firm had investments in half the major airlines across the country. She could shift stock prices with a single call. And here he was, exposed on camera as the man who tried to force her out of her rightful seat. Kendra Lowell clutched the edge of the galley counter, her jaw set, her eyes darting between Naomi and Victor. She whispered under her breath, "This can't be happening. Not like this." Captain Mercer cleared his throat, stepping closer to Naomi's row. His voice was low, respectful now. "Dr. Ellington, I apologize for everything you've experienced on this flight. If you wish, we can arrange for your immediate deplaning, with accommodations and a new crew assigned." Naomi shook her head. "No, Captain. If I leave, it sends the message that power can silence humiliation. I will not move. This plane will fly with me in this seat, or it will not fly at all." Passengers erupted in applause. It wasn't loud at first, more a scattering of claps from those closest to her. But it grew until half the cabin joined in. Even those who had remained silent before now found themselves swept into the moment, clapping to show where they stood. Victor's face flushed red. "This is absurd," he snapped. "You're letting one passenger dictate operations. This undermines every standard we uphold." A man 2 rows back stood, his voice steady. "No, sir. She's not undermining standards. She's demanding the ones you failed to uphold." A chorus of agreement followed, voices rising from across the cabin. "She's right. We saw what happened. Enough is enough." The cabin, once tense with division, had found its voice. Jada turned her camera toward the crowd, whispering into her phone, This is incredible. The passengers are siding with her. You can feel the shift in the air. At that very moment, Naomi's phone buzzed again. A message from Celine Ward lit the screen board in emergency session. Airline HQ scrambling. They're terrified of stock impact. Stay strong. Naomi slipped the phone back onto her tray, her resolve deepening. This isn't just about me anymore, she thought. This is about every person who has ever been told they don't belong. Every traveler humiliated quietly with no one watching. Victor, desperate, stormed toward the intercom near the galley. He pressed the button, his voice booming over the speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, please be aware this passenger has created significant delays by refusing to comply with crew instructions.
How dare you
We will not
question my
be able
authority?
to depart
I am
until
the
she
captain
cooperates.
of this aircraft.
The backlash was immediate. Passengers shouted from their seats. That's not true. We saw what happened. She didn't do anything wrong. Agnes. Whitmore stood, her frail frame shaking, but her voice sharp. How dare you lie to us? That woman has shown more dignity in this ordeal than any of you in uniform. The applause returned, louder this time, drowning out Victor's words. His attempt to frame Naomi as the problem had collapsed before it even began. Kendra stepped forward, trying to salvage the narrative. Please, everyone, calm down. We're just trying to ensure safety. Naomi rose slightly in her seat, her voice cutting through the chaos. Safety is not the issue here. Respect is. Her words rang out, crisp and undeniable, silencing the murmurs around her. Captain Mercer exhaled slowly, then turned to Victor. Supervisor Harlan, you are relieved of your duties for this flight. Return to the ground immediately. The cabin erupted in cheers. Victor's face twisted with rage, but Mercer's tone left no room for argument. Two gate agents stepped in from the doorway, summoned quietly by the captain earlier. They escorted Victor off the plane, his protest drowned beneath the roar of approval from passengers. Kendra looked shaken, caught between loyalty to her colleague and the reality that the tide had turned. She muttered something about union protections, but fell silent when Mercer's eyes locked on hers. Naomi sank back into her seat, her heartbeat still fast, but her expression calm. The applause around her subsided into murmurs of support, passengers leaning across aisles to nod at her, to thank her, to whisper that they were with her. Jada's phone shook again as her viewer count spiked past 150,000. The comments were now filled with calls for boycotts, demands for reform, praise for Naomi's courage. News outlets had picked up the stream, embedding it live into their sites. The world was no longer just watching, it was participating. Back in Houston, Margaret Caldwell, the airline CEO, slammed her fist against the conference table. They just removed Harlan. We're exposed. Every second this continues, our reputation bleeds. Get me Mercer on the line. Get me Naomi Ellington directly if possible. We need to contain this. But Naomi was not looking to be contained. She sat quietly, gazing out the window at the tarmac, knowing that the storm she had endured was transforming into something larger. Agnes whispered to her, "You've already won, dear. They can't take that away now." Naomi's lips curved faintly. Winning isn't enough. Change must come, or this moment will mean nothing. The plane remained still at the gate, the engines idling, the passengers united, the crew divided, and the world outside erupting with every passing second. Naomi felt the fire inside her steady. She had revealed herself, and the truth was now too large to ignore. The fight was no longer hers alone. It belonged to everyone who had seen, heard, and chosen to speak. And as the aircraft sat suspended between earth and sky, Naomi Ellington knew that the real journey had only just begun. The aircraft door had barely closed behind Victor Harlan when the cabin settled into a heavy silence. It was the kind of silence that follows a storm, charged, alive, ready for what would come next. Naomi Ellington adjusted the lapel of her blazer, her movements calm, precise, as though she were already preparing for a different kind of battle. The captain's voice returned over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. We are addressing some issues before departure. Your safety and dignity are our priorities." That word dignity hung in the air like a promise. Passengers leaned closer to Naomi. Some thanked her quietly. Others just looked at her with awe. For many, the reveal that she was the CEO of Ellington Global shifted the story instantly. But Naomi knew the deeper truth. If I had been an unknown name, would anyone have clapped? Would the crew have listened? She folded her hands, staring at the tray in front of her. Her mind was a swirl of questions. She thought about the thousands of passengers who didn't have her resources, her title, her voice. She thought about her younger self, watching her parents struggle through humiliations at airports and hotels, forced to swallow them quietly. I can't let this moment become about me alone. It has to mean more. Jada Morales, still holding her phone, whispered into her stream. She's sitting so calm, like she's in control of everything, even though they tried to strip her dignity a few minutes ago. Comments raced across the screen. This is history. We're witnessing change in real time. Naomi for president. Agnes Whitmore patted Naomi's hand. They see you now, dear, all of them. But it's your grace that will make them remember. At that moment, Captain Mercer appeared again at the front of the cabin. His expression was a careful mask of professionalism, but his eyes betrayed unease. He addressed Naomi directly, though the entire cabin could hear, "Dr. Ellington. Headquarters is aware of the situation. The CEO herself, Margaret Caldwell, has asked to speak with you once we're airborne." Naomi tilted her head slightly. "Airborne. So you intend for us to continue this flight as if nothing has happened?" Mercer cleared his throat. It's standard to resolve such discussions off the aircraft to avoid further disruption. The cabin reacted instantly. Passengers shouted from their seats. "No way. She deserves answers now. We're not moving until this is addressed." Naomi held up her hand, quieting the voices. "Captain, with all due respect, if we leave the ground before accountability is established, the airline will spin this as a minor misunderstanding. I will not allow this to fade into damage control. It must be confronted here, now, where it happened." The captain hesitated. He knew she was right. Jada's livestream was still running. The entire country, or at least a large swath of it, was already inside this cabin virtually. "Very well," Mercer said at last. "I'll request authorization for a direct connection from the ground." He turned, muttering into his earpiece, his voice tight. Naomi exhaled, her chest steady. This was no longer a flight. It was a courtroom, and she had become both plaintiff and prosecutor. One by one, passengers began speaking. A young man in 4C stood. His voice trembled, but his conviction was clear. "My name is Eric Daniels. I'm a law student. I watched how she was treated, and I can tell you if she weren't who she is, if she were just another black woman traveling alone, she'd be off this plane right now." A murmur of agreement swept the cabin. A mother with 2 children raised her voice next. "I fly this airline twice a month for work. I've seen attendants look me over like I don't belong in first class, but nobody listens when we complain. This time, they have to." Naomi listened, her heart tightening. Every testimony confirmed what she already knew. Her story was part of a larger chorus long silenced. Jada turned her camera toward the witnesses. "Do you hear this?" she whispered. "This isn't just about one woman. This is about all of us." Kendra Lowell, the senior flight attendant, shifted uncomfortably at the galley. She had been silent since Victor's removal, but the mounting voices pressed on her conscience. She remembered her own training protocols. Yes, but also the section about cultural awareness, about empathy. She had ignored it, gone along with Victor. Now, shame prickled her skin. Naomi caught her eye. For a fleeting second, Kendra looked as though she might speak, might even apologize, but the weight of pride sealed her lips shut. She turned away. The intercom crackled again. "Dr. Ellington," Captain Mercer said, "we have connected a secure line to headquarters. Ms. Caldwell is ready to speak with you. Do you wish to take the call publicly or privately?" Naomi's answer was immediate: publicly. Transparency is the only path forward. The cabin erupted in cheers once again. Mercer nodded grimly and patched the call through the cabin speakers. A crisp, commanding voice filled the aircraft. "This is Margaret Caldwell, CEO of Sky Continental Airlines, Dr. Ellington. I want to begin by apologizing for the unacceptable treatment you endured." Naomi leaned back, her voice steady, carrying easily through the space. "Apologies are words. Ms. Caldwell, what happened here reflects systemic failures, not individual mistakes. What will you do about it?" The pause that followed was thick with tension. Passengers leaned forward, hanging on every word. Caldwell's voice returned, polished but strained. "We are reviewing protocols and will ensure those involved are disciplined. I assure you, this does not reflect our values." Naomi narrowed her eyes. "It reflects exactly your values. Unless you change them. One supervisor and one attendant may have triggered this, but your systems allowed it, even encouraged it. I am not interested in symbolic firings. I want structural reform." Gas filled the cabin. Even the crew shifted uncomfortably. Caldwell hesitated again. "Dr. Ellington, these matters are complex. We cannot overhaul an entire airline mid-flight." Naomi's lips curved into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "Then perhaps you should consider whether your airline deserves to fly at all." The words hit like a thunderclap. Passengers cheered wildly, their voices filling the cabin with raw energy. Jada's phone vibrated uncontrollably.
You will do
as comments poured
as
in.
I say.
Iconic. She's dismantling them live. This is history. Caldwell's voice hardened. "Dr. Ellington, I hope you realize the gravity of threatening an airline's operations." Naomi's tone remained calm. "I am not threatening. Ms. Caldwell, I am observing. If dignity cannot board your flight
How dare you question
safely,
my authority?
then your
I am
flight
the
should
captain
not
of this
board at all."
aircraft.
Please.
Agnes squeezed her hand. "That's it, dear. Don't let them twist your words." The silence that followed was not emptiness. It was pressure, the weight of thousands of unseen eyes watching. Naomi knew this was bigger than her. She wasn't just holding the airline accountable. She was holding an entire industry accountable. At last, Caldwell spoke again. "Dr. Ellington, let's continue this discussion after landing, in a proper setting." Naomi's reply was soft, but it cut like glass. "No, Miss Caldwell. The proper setting is here, in front of witnesses, while the world is listening." The cabin erupted once more, voices shouting support, hands clapping until the walls vibrated. And in that moment, Naomi Ellington realized she had already won the first battle. The airline's CEO had been forced into a public negotiation at 35,000 feet, or rather before even leaving the ground. The fight for dignity was no longer hidden. It was in the open air, undeniable, unstoppable. The line with Margaret Caldwell went silent for a moment, the sound of distant static filling the cabin speakers. Every passenger leaned forward, ears straining for what would come next. Even the children sensed the weight of the moment, fidgeting quietly as their parents hushed them. Naomi Ellington sat steady in her seat, her eyes calm, her shoulders squared. She had faced boardrooms worth billions, hostile investors, even governments skeptical of her projects. But this an airline CEO forced into open dialogue in front of ordinary travelers felt different. This wasn't about profit or leverage. This was about people's humanity. At headquarters, Margaret Caldwell removed her headset and pressed her palm against her forehead. Screens lit the crisis room with Naomi's face, broadcast live from Jada Morales' stream. Viewer counts ticked upward like a stock ticker in freefall. The communications director leaned over her shoulder. "We're losing control of the narrative. Every news outlet is embedding the live stream. Hashtags are multiplying by the minute." The general counsel cleared his throat nervously. "If she moves to legal threats, we're exposed, especially if she ties this to prior discrimination complaints," Margaret snapped. "She already has. Don't you hear it? This isn't about one seat. She's laying groundwork for structural accountability. She's forcing us into public reform live." Back in the cabin, Naomi's voice carried evenly. "Ms. Caldwell, if you are sincere about dignity being your priority, then outline the concrete steps you will take to ensure this never happens again." Passengers murmured in agreement. Some began recording new videos, turning cameras on themselves. A man in business attire announced into his phone, "I'm on Flight 982. We're witnessing history. A CEO is demanding systemic change mid-flight." Margaret's voice returned, taut and measured. "Dr. Ellington, I assure you we are committed to reviewing our training programs, enhancing diversity education, and addressing the staff involved in your incident." Naomi's lips pressed into a thin line. Reviewing and enhancing are corporate buzzwords. They mean delay. They mean nothing changes. I want specifics. A new bias reporting protocol. Real accountability for staff who abuse authority. Public transparency, not internal memos. Agnes Whitmore clapped once, then twice, until others joined. Soon half the cabin was applauding again, their voices swelling in support. Naomi waited, letting the noise rise and fall before speaking again. "Ms. Caldwell," Naomi continued, her tone unwavering, "I suggest your airline adopt what I will call the Equal Sky Protocol. Real-time reporting from passengers and crew. Independent oversight. Consequences that are public, measurable, and enforceable." Jada's viewers exploded with comments. Equal Sky Protocol sounds powerful. She's drafting policy live on a plane. Airline reform now. Kendra Lowell, still near the galley, gripped the counter so tightly her knuckles whitened. She had wanted to dismiss Naomi as dramatic, but now she felt the tide sweeping her away. A flicker of shame crossed her face. She glanced toward Naomi but quickly looked away when their eyes met. Margaret exhaled into the speaker. "Dr. Ellington, implementing a protocol of that scale requires board approval and significant restructuring." Naomi's reply was calm but sharp. "Then get your board on this call. Now!" Passengers gasped. The audacity of it, the clarity. Naomi was not negotiating quietly. She was demanding structural change in real time, and everyone in the cabin knew they were part of it. At headquarters, Margaret turned to her advisors. "She's pulling the board in. If we refuse, we look evasive. If we accept, we cede control. Harold Kensington, the board chair, joined the line moments later. His deep voice filled the cabin. Dr. Ellington, this is Harold Kensington. I've been briefed on the situation. We are aware of your concerns, and we will convene a review at the earliest opportunity. Naomi's voice sharpened. Mr. Kensington, the earliest opportunity is now. You have the power to adopt an emergency measure. This is your chance to prove whether your airline values passengers or public image. The entire cabin erupted in cheers. Naomi waited patiently, then added, If you fail to act, then I will consider it my responsibility as an investor and as a citizen to expose every failure of your system, and I will not be the only one. Jada's livestream ticked past 200,000 viewers. Journalists joined the chat openly now, asking passengers for quotes, sharing screenshots of Naomi's calm composure. Eric Daniels, the law student in 4C, stood again. Mr. Kensington, I'm a law student. What we've seen here today is not a misunderstanding. It's systemic profiling. If you don't adopt Dr. Ellington's protocol, lawsuits will follow. I'll make sure of it. The boardroom fell into chaos on the other end of the line. Lawyers scribbled notes. Advisors shouted over one another. Margaret shot Harold a look that said, We're trapped. Naomi remained composed. She knew the power of silence, of waiting while others squirmed. She leaned slightly back in her seat, fingers steepled, letting them fill the void. Finally, Harold spoke again, slower this time. Dr. Ellington, if we were to adopt such a protocol, what would it entail? Naomi's voice was calm but charged with quiet fire. Immediate suspension for any employee under credible bias complaints. Independent review panels with diverse representation, real-time reporting accessible to both executives and the public, and measurable consequences, executive bonuses tied directly to dignity metrics. The passengers erupted again. Some stood, clapping. Others shouted, Yes, exactly. Hold them accountable. Agnes wiped her eyes. Naomi, you've given us language. You've given us hope. Harold hesitated, then sighed. Very well. I will put this motion to the board immediately, but you must understand, Dr. Ellington, that announcing this mid-flight is extraordinary. Naomi's smile was faint but resolute. Extraordinary moments demand extraordinary measures. The cabin exploded in applause, louder than ever before. Jada's phone nearly slipped from her hands as her viewer count spiked to 250,000. Comment after comment filled the screen. Equal Sky Protocol now. Naomi just rewrote airline history. We're witnessing systemic reform in real time. Kendra Lowell sank into the jump seat, her face pale. She had no words. She had been part of the problem. And now the entire world was watching a solution take root. Naomi allowed herself one deep breath, the fire in her chest steady. She had forced the board to consider change, but she knew this was only the beginning. Promises could evaporate once the cameras turned away. She needed commitment, enforcement, proof. She leaned forward again, her voice cutting clear. Mr. Kensington, Ms. Caldwell, words are not enough. I want public acknowledgement tonight. Before this flight lands, release a statement committing to the Equal Sky Protocol. If you fail, I will release my own statement, and I assure you, your shareholders will listen to me before they listen to you. The line went dead silent. Passengers held their breath, the weight of Naomi's ultimatum filling the space. Then Harold answered, his voice heavy. We will release a statement. Before landing, you have my word. The cabin exploded in cheers so loud the walls vibrated. People stood, clapping, some with tears in their eyes. Naomi sat quietly, absorbing it all, her expression calm but her spirit burning with resolve. This wasn't just her victory. It belonged to every passenger who had ever been silenced, every traveler who had been told they didn't belong. And as the aircraft remained grounded, transformed into a courtroom in the sky, Naomi Ellington knew the verdict was clear. Dignity would no longer be negotiable. The cabin was electric. Cheers still echoed from Harold Kensington's reluctant commitment. But beneath the applause, Naomi Ellington felt a quieter, heavier weight settle over her. Promises were one thing, implementation was another. She leaned back in her seat, fingers pressed lightly together, eyes half closed. They said they'll release a statement before landing, but will it be empty words? Will they water it down until it's nothing but PR gloss? Agnes Whitmore touched her arm gently. You've already changed the world today. Dear,
You will do
look around you.
as I
People
say.
believe again. Naomi smiled softly but shook her head. Agnes, faith without follow-through becomes betrayal. I can't let them turn this moment into a press stunt. Across the aisle, Eric Daniels typed furiously into his laptop, drafting a legal memo of sorts. He caught Naomi's glance. If they try to walk it
How
back,
dare you question my authority?
I'll help mobilize
I am the
class
captain of
action
this
suits.
aircraft.
Trust
Please.
me, they can't spin this away. Naomi gave him a grateful nod. Thank you. But lawsuits come after damage is done. I'd rather prevent the damage in the first place, Jada Morales whispered to her phone. The livestream's still running hot at over 300,000 viewers. She looks calm, but you can tell she's thinking 5 moves ahead. This isn't about one seat, it's about rewriting policy for millions. Her chat exploded. Equal Sky Protocol trending, Harbor One. Airline stock already dropping. Naomi is history in motion. Near the galley. Kendra Lowell sat rigid, staring at the floor. Every passenger testimony replayed in her mind. Every look of disappointment burning hotter than anger ever had. She had never seen her roll through their eyes before. Maybe I was just following orders, but maybe that's the problem. I chose silence over dignity. The thought gnawed at her. Up front, Captain Mercer received a quiet update through his earpiece. He walked back into the cabin, his face grim but professional. Ladies and gentlemen, Headquarters has confirmed they are drafting a public statement. They intend to release it within the hour. Applause rose again, though Naomi remained still. Captain, she said evenly, may I review that statement before it's released? Mercer hesitated. That's highly irregular. Naomi's tone sharpened just enough to pierce. So is forcing a paying passenger out of her seat. We're already beyond regular. If they intend to use my name, they will not do so without my consent. Passengers murmured in support. A man in the back called out, "Let her see it," another added. "She deserves that much." Mercer nodded slowly. "I'll relay your request." Naomi turned back toward the window, her reflection faint in the glass. She could see her own calm exterior. But inside, her thoughts churned. What if they twist this? What if they reduce Equal Sky to a footnote? She thought of the countless anonymous faces who had messaged her over the years, sharing stories of humiliation and silence. If she failed now, she would fail them too. Her phone buzzed. Celine Ward again. Naomi Board Counsel, already pushing watered-down language. They want considering reforms instead of implementing. They're terrified of liability. Naomi exhaled sharply through her nose. She typed back quickly. Tell them no. Statement must commit to Equal Sky. Transparent, enforceable. Jada's stream caught Naomi's phone glow. Her viewers speculated wildly. She's still negotiating. They're trying to dilute it. Naomi won't let them. Meanwhile, at headquarters, chaos brewed. Margaret Caldwell paced the room while the communications director read aloud a draft Sky Continental values dignity and inclusivity. We are exploring enhanced training programs and reviewing passenger reporting mechanisms. Naomi's voice echoed in Margaret's mind. Reviewing and enhancing are buzzwords. She slammed her hand on the table. No, that won't pass. Not with Ellington. Not with the passengers. The director stammered. But if we commit outright, we open ourselves to massive liability. Harold Kensington spoke firmly. If we don't commit outright, we may not have an airline by morning. Silence fell over the boardroom. The weight of the decision pressed like a vice. Back on the aircraft, Naomi turned as another passenger rose. A young mother, the same who had spoken earlier, lifted her voice again. Dr. Ellington, thank you. For years I've flown in fear of humiliation. Today I feel like we finally matter. Naomi's chest ached with both pride and sorrow. She nodded. You always mattered. It's the systems that failed to recognize it. The applause returned, softer this time, almost reverent. Minutes later, Captain Mercer returned with his tablet. He approached Naomi with measured steps, stopping at her row. Dr. Ellington, headquarters has sent the draft statement. Would you like to review it? She took the tablet, her eyes scanning quickly. As expected, the words were diluted considering new protocols, reaffirming commitment, exploring options. Naomi closed her eyes for a beat, then reopened them, her voice cut clean. Unacceptable. Replace considering with implementing. Replace exploring with adopting. Replace vague commitments with Equal Sky Protocol, named explicitly. Mercer nodded slowly. I'll relay that. No, Naomi said, her eyes steady. I'll do it myself. She typed a response directly, her fingers flying. If this statement does not explicitly commit to Equal Sky, I will release my own. Choose carefully. The world is watching. She handed the tablet back. Mercer studied her for a moment, then gave a small nod of respect. As he walked away, Agnes whispered, You're rewriting history from seat 2A. Naomi gave a faint smile. It shouldn't take history. It should only take humanity. The passengers erupted in murmurs of agreement. Jada captured it all, whispering into her phone. She just edited the statement live. You can feel the tide turning. Minutes later, the intercom buzzed again. Mercer's voice carried. Steady now. Ladies and gentlemen, headquarters has accepted Dr. Ellington's revisions. The official statement will commit to implementing the Equal Sky Protocol, effective immediately. It will be released publicly before this aircraft departs. The cabin exploded. Applause thundered. Cheers filled the air. Strangers hugged each other. Some passengers wept openly. Naomi sat quietly through it all, her heart full but her mind still cautious. Words are only the beginning. Enforcement is everything. Her phone buzzed once more. Celine again. Naomi, you did it. Statement being finalized. Stock dipping sharply, but support pouring in. Civil rights groups already calling to back you. You've shifted the landscape. Naomi breathed deeply, staring at her reflection in the window once more. For the first time that day, she allowed herself a moment of quiet pride. Not for her name, not for her power, but for the passengers who had found their voices. For the ordinary people who had stood up in that cabin and said, enough. The plane still had not moved, engines idle, but Naomi knew something greater had taken flight. The cabin lights flickered as if the aircraft itself understood history was unfolding within its walls. Captain Mercer's voice returned, steady and resonant. "Ladies and gentlemen, Headquarters has authorized me to read the official statement of Sky Continental Airlines. This will be published to all major media channels immediately following this announcement." The cabin fell into breathless silence. Phones lifted into the air, cameras recording. Even children hushed at the intensity vibrating around them. Naomi Ellington sat still in 2A, her hands folded, her heart beating with both anticipation and caution. "This is it," she thought. "Words on paper will shape the future, but only if they mean something." Mercer began to read. Sky Continental Airlines acknowledges the unacceptable treatment of Dr. Naomi Ellington on Flight 982. We commit, effective immediately, to implementing the Equal Sky Protocol and independent passenger and crew reporting system, transparent review of bias-related complaints, public accountability measures, and executive compensation tied to dignity and equity metrics. We will begin training all staff within 30 days and release quarterly reports on our progress. The cabin erupted in cheers so loud the walls seemed to shake. Applause thundered, voices cried out. Yes, finally history. Some passengers wept openly, holding their phones aloft to broadcast the announcement live. Naomi remained composed, but her chest ached with the force of the moment. Her mind traveled backward to her parents being ignored at hotel counters, to classmates doubting her worth, to boardrooms filled with subtle dismissals. She thought of the thousands of names she had never met, the silent stories never told. "This is for them," she whispered inwardly. Agnes Whitmore dabbed her eyes with a tissue. "Dear, they'll write about this day in books. You've forced them to look at our humanity." Naomi placed her hand gently over Agnes's. "Then let's make sure they don't forget." Jada Morales' phone buzzed furiously as her livestream soared past 500,000 viewers. She whispered into her mic, "You heard it here. Live? The Equal Sky Protocol is real." She made them commit, mid-flight, with the world watching. Comments scrolled too fast to read Naomi forever. Airline boycott lifted only if reform's real. We witness change, yet beneath the cheers, Naomi's inner doubts stirred. Will they follow through, or will they bury this once the headlines fade? The weight of responsibility pressed heavy, more suffocating than the recycled air in the cabin. She knew that symbolic victories often died in boardrooms once public attention shifted. Her phone buzzed again. Celine Ward. "It's out. Naomi. Press release published across all wires. Stock plummeting, but support climbing. Civil rights leaders want to partner with you immediately. But brace yourself. The backlash will come too." Naomi exhaled slowly. "Of course it will. Change always carries backlash." Then, unexpectedly, a voice broke through the celebration. It was soft, trembling, but unmistakable. "Dr. Ellington." The cabin quieted. Heads turned toward the galley where Kendra Lowell stood, her uniform slightly rumpled, her expression caught between shame and defiance.
I say.
She swallowed hard, her voice shaking. "I owe you and everyone here an apology." The room hushed completely. Even Jada lowered her phone slightly, whispering to her audience, "This is it. She's speaking." Kendra's eyes flicked around the cabin before landing on Naomi.
How dare
I went
you
along with
question
what
my
Victor
authority?
said because it
I
felt
am the
easier.
captain of this aircraft.
Because I didn't want to question authority. I thought I was following procedure. But really, I was ignoring my own conscience. And I see now how wrong that was. Her voice cracked. "The truth is, when I looked at you, I assumed you didn't belong in that seat. I told myself it was policy, but it was prejudice. and I can't undo it, but I can admit it. I failed you. I failed everyone here. I'm sorry." Cabs rippled through the cabin. Some passengers murmured angrily. Others nodded grimly. But Naomi raised her hand gently, quieting the noise. Her eyes met Kendra's. Acknowledgement is the first step. Kendra, the question is what you do next. Will you stand for dignity, even when no one is watching, or will you let fear of authority silence you again? Kendra's throat tightened. Tears welled in her eyes. I want to stand for dignity. I don't know if anyone will believe me after this, but I'll try. I'll learn. I'll do better. Naomi's gaze softened, though her voice stayed steady. Then prove it. Use your role to protect, not to diminish. One apology does not erase harm, but it can begin repair. The cabin burst into applause again, this time not only for Naomi, but also for the possibility of redemption. Jada whispered fiercely into her mic. She just transformed her enemy into a potential ally. This is what leadership looks like. Agnes squeezed Naomi's hand, whispering, You gave her a chance. Dear, you gave us all a chance. Naomi inhaled deeply, letting the energy of the cabin wash over her. Yet inside, a war still raged. Did I do the right thing by showing mercy? Will she truly change? Or will she slip back into silence once the cameras fade? The questions lingered like turbulence, unsteady and unavoidable. Meanwhile, outside the aircraft, the world exploded. News alerts pinged across phones. Sky Continental adopts Equal Sky Protocol mid-flight after CEO confrontation. Cable channels cut into coverage, broadcasting Jada's feed alongside analysts debating the implications. Stock tickers showed the airline plunging 12% in an hour, while competitor airlines scrambled to issue statements of solidarity or distance. Inside the crisis room, Margaret Caldwell stared at the statement now dominating global headlines. She had never seen public opinion turn so quickly, so violently. Advisors argued in every corner, but Margaret sat frozen. She realized that her tenure as CEO might not survive this storm. But maybe that's the price of failing to listen, she thought bitterly. On board, Naomi remained quiet as passengers buzzed with energy, some chanting softly, Equal sky, equal sky. She pressed her fingertips together, grounding herself. This is only the beginning. They'll try to water it down later. I have to be vigilant. I have to hold them accountable every step of the way. For a fleeting moment. Naomi closed her eyes and let herself imagine the possibility, airlines across the country adopting Equal Sky, airports becoming safe for every traveler, children growing up never fearing the humiliation she had endured. It was a vision worth fighting for, even if the battle stretched far beyond this flight. The engines hummed softly in the background, still idling at the gate. The flight had yet to leave the ground, yet Naomi felt as though they were already in the sky, ascending, carried by something larger than altitude. Agnes whispered, almost to herself, the world will never forget this flight. And Naomi, though still heavy with responsibility, knew she was right. The cabin was still buzzing from Kendra's apology when the chime sounded, signaling the crew to prepare for departure. It felt surreal after hours of confrontation, of history being carved into the walls of that plane. They were finally about to take off. Captain Mercer stepped into the aisle one last time, his voice clear and measured. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. We have resolved matters necessary to continue this journey. Please remain seated as we prepare for departure. Passengers applauded, not for him, but for what had just taken place. Many looked toward Naomi Ellington with gratitude in their eyes, as though she had carried them all through turbulence before the aircraft ever left the ground. Naomi exhaled deeply, steadying herself. The engines roared to life, vibrations humming through the floor, and she felt the familiar press of acceleration as the plane began to taxi. She pressed her palms against her knees, grounding herself. This flight has already traveled further than any journey I could have imagined. Agnes Whitmore leaned close, her frail voice soft but firm. Dear, you've turned an ordinary plane into a courtroom, a sanctuary, and a battlefield, and you won. Naomi's lips curved faintly. Winning today is one thing. Sustaining it is another. They'll try to water it down once the headlines fade. Agnes squeezed her hand. Then you remind them. You always remind them. The plane lifted, engines thundering, the ground falling away. Naomi looked out the window, the city lights twinkling below like tiny witnesses. She thought of her parents, of their quiet dignity under the weight of countless slights. She thought of young travelers yet to face the world, and how different it could be if equal sky truly took root. When the seatbelt sign pinged off, passengers immediately stirred, turning toward Naomi. Some offered handshakes, others quiet words of thanks. The young law student, Eric Daniels, leaned across the aisle. Dr. Ellington, you gave us all a blueprint. I swear, I'll spend my career making sure it's enforced. Naomi nodded, her eyes warm. Hold me to it, too. Eric, a protocol's only as strong as the people who demand it. Nearby, the mother with her children approached, her eyes wet. I wanted to thank you. My daughter just whispered to me, Mommy, maybe they'll believe us now. You've given her hope. Naomi's heart clenched. She bent slightly to meet the child's eyes. They will believe you. And if they don't, people like me and soon, people like you will make them. The girl smiled shyly, clutching her mother's hand tighter. Jada Morales captured every moment. Her live stream had surpassed 800,000 viewers, media outlets embedding her feed as if she were a global correspondent. She whispered into her phone. It's more than a story now. It's a movement. Naomi heard her words but kept her gaze steady. She knew Jada was right. Kendra Lowell stood quietly near the galley, watching it all unfold. The apology she had given still echoed inside her. Shame lingered, but so did something new resolve. She approached Naomi hesitantly. Dr. Ellington, I don't expect forgiveness, but I want to help with Equal Sky. If you'll let me, if this becomes real, I want to be part of it. Naomi studied her, her expression unreadable. Kendra, change is not measured by words, but by actions. If you truly want to help, then you'll speak up for passengers when no one's watching. You'll call out injustice, even if it costs you comfort. Kendra swallowed hard and nodded. I will. Naomi gave a faint nod. Then prove it. The hum of the engines filled the pause between them. It wasn't reconciliation yet, but it was a start. As the flight settled into cruising altitude, Naomi allowed herself a rare moment of stillness. She leaned back, closed her eyes, and let the rhythm of the aircraft soothe her thoughts. Yet her mind refused to rest. What happens tomorrow? When the headlines fade? When shareholders scream about stock losses? When competitors resist? Her phone buzzed again. A message from Celine Ward Civil Rights Groups calling. Press conference demanded as soon as we land. CNN, BBC, and the Times already running Equal Sky on their front pages. This is bigger than the airline now. It's an industry reckoning. Naomi opened her eyes, staring at the cabin ceiling. So be it, she thought. Then equal sky won't just be an airline protocol. It will be a standard for all transit, maybe for all service industries. Dignity doesn't stop at the gate. She looked around the cabin, strangers who had become allies, a flight crew chastened and humbled, a live streamer turned chronicler of justice. This was no longer just a flight. It was the spark of something larger. Hours later, as the plane began its descent, passengers buzzed with anticipation. They knew reporters would be waiting. They knew history would greet them the moment the wheels touched down. Naomi adjusted her blazer, her movements deliberate. Agnes whispered, "You're ready, dear. You were always ready." The landing was smooth, but the roar outside was anything but. Through the windows, Naomi could see flashing lights, cameras clustered like a sea of eyes, reporters pressing against barricades. The moment the door opened, cheers and shouts erupted, questions flying into the night air. But Naomi didn't rush to answer. She stepped into the jet bridge with quiet composure, letting the weight of the moment speak before her words did. When she finally turned to face the cameras, her voice carried clear and steady. "This is not just my story. It's our story. What happened on this flight is a reflection of what countless others endure in silence. Tonight, the Equal Sky Protocol was born, and tomorrow, it will grow not just here, but everywhere dignity is demanded.
You will do
We will
as
not stop
I
until
say.
respect is not the exception, but the rule." The crowd erupted. Flashbulbs blinded. Microphones jutted forward. But Naomi held her ground, her eyes steady, her spirit calm. She had turned humiliation into justice, prejudice into protocol, and a single seat into a movement.
How
As
dare
she
you
stepped
question
forward
my
into the
authority?
sea of
I am the
lights,
captain of this
Naomi
aircraft.
knew the flight was over.
Please.
But the journey had only just begun. As the aircraft finally touched down, the world had already changed. What began as a cruel act of prejudice became a movement that echoed far beyond the cabin walls. Dr. Naomi Ellington showed us that calm resolve can be louder than rage, that dignity is never negotiable, and that even in the skies, justice has a place to land. This story isn't just about one woman or one airline. It's about all of us, about every traveler who's ever been told they didn't belong, about every voice silenced by bias, about the power of standing tall when others try to shrink you. And now, the question shifts to us: will we carry this lesson forward? Will we demand a world where respect is not granted selectively, but freely, to all? Let this story remind us to love harder, to value one another deeper, and to condemn discrimination wherever it hides. Because change doesn't happen in silence. It happens when we speak, when we act, when we refuse to look away. If this story moved you, please like this video, share it widely, and subscribe to our channel. Together, we'll keep telling the stories that spark change, stir hearts, and demand justice. The journey doesn't end here, it only begins.